Okay, I think we'll get underway. Welcome to another webinar series in the Red and the Black webinar series. Today we're joined by Sylvia Gallagher, who's acting Assistant Commissioner at the Australian Taxation Office, to talk to us about the lodgement programs and dealing with accountants. So Sylvia is an Assistant Commissioner responsible for the ATO's relationship with the tax profession, including engagement, consultation, and the practitioner lodgement program. Sylvia also leads the schools and community education programs, tax help and tax time, paper products, and individual web content. With over 20 years experience in the ATO, Sylvia has specialist skills in user-centered design, design facilitation, project management and policy, and new measures design and development. A regular host on Tax Professionals Live conversation streams, Sylvia is currently studying her Masters in Business Administration. So welcome today, Sylvia, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so we'll get underway. Just before we start, there is a chat function below. We'll take questions at the end. As you know, for those that have attended these previously, they're fairly short, sharp sessions. And there'll be plenty of time for questions at the conclusion of the session. So, Sylvia, what can accountants expect from the ATO in terms of the lodgement program for the balance of this financial year?
Well, Steve, firstly, I actually did want to start by recognising the really important role that tax and BAS agents and accountants have played over the last, I guess, 18 months. So with the bushfires, at the beginning of last year, and then then COVID and the pandemic, and then the outcomes of that ever since. We do recognise that practitioners were not only helping their clients to access and assist stimulus measures, they were going through the pandemic themselves. They were worried for themselves, for their families. Some of them had their own businesses. So we do recognise the extraordinary role that has been played by the profession over that time and continues to be played. And I think we did hear from a lot of tax professionals that they were counsellors for a lot of the time. So that's not an easy role to play, but it is really important. So I did want to start by saying thank you. The ATO does recognise the amount of work that the profession has done and the role that they've played. Going forward, I think we've been hearing a lot about how we get back, economic recovery, what do we need to do? And the ATO is no different. We are looking at making sure people are re-engaged, making sure that the community understands our position and where we're going. So we are, we did start back with a bit of an empathetic approach. So earlier this year, we started, some of your clients may have had phone calls from our debt and lodgement area just to find out how people were going with their debts. So we weren't necessarily chasing debts at that point. We were just calling to have a chat about how people were feeling and whether they needed any support. And then, since then we've continued that empathetic approach, but have started to ramp up a bit more of, okay, well, you do have this debt with the ATO. Is there a payment plan? Let's think about putting you into either a payment deferral or a payment plan to make sure that you can get back on track. One of the things that we were quite worried about was, kicking the can down the road by offering a whole lot of deferrals and not chasing up debt, and people being in a worse position coming out of the pandemic than they would have been if they'd remained engaged. And so we've kind of got to find that balance to make sure that we, we're not putting people in a worse position where they didn't necessarily have to be. But you can certainly expect, we are starting to re-engage with people. We are starting to call people again. We are starting to, understand people's positions and then tailoring our support to, well, what does that mean for you and what do you then need going forward? So, it is different for every state. Everyone's experienced COVID differently. Even in the same state, people have experienced it differently. Some companies have done really, really well and others have really struggled. So, there's no one size fits all approach for us here. It really is, what people can expect from us going forward is understanding different situations, looking around and then seeing what's happening around you as well, and then you know, working with you to I guess to try and you know, put things in place so that we can help. It is really important, I do want to say really early on, to keep lodging. So even if you have clients who can't pay, it is really important to lodge, because that shows us that there are signs of life, and it also shows us where areas may be struggling more than others. So it actually gives us a bit of a picture of where we can allocate resources, where we can allocate support based on what we're seeing in terms of lodgement figures and what's coming through. We do have lots of options for deferring payments, as I said, and payment plans. So that lodging is really, really important, because it keeps people engaged and it lets us know what's going on as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. I know we've spoke to a lot of accountants over the last sort of 18 months or so since the start of the pandemic, and so many of them have done a fantastic job with their clients in terms of, you know, in particular with JobKeeper, making sure that everything's lodged, putting, you know, assisting their clients, and as you say, you know, quite, you know, being that counselling service for a lot of clients, you know, who are experiencing, you know, a lot of uncertainty regarding their businesses. So yes, I share that sentiment exactly. So yeah, hopefully we don't have any more lockdowns. Hopefully we're starting to see us coming out of the pandemic, hopefully. So, you know, we get through, say, this financial year. What's likely, do you think, what's likely to happen in the following financial year, the 23 financial year?
So I think, you know, there's probably not too much that will change necessarily in terms of the way that we're going. So it is about re-engaging. It is about getting people back into the system. You know, we do have an obligation to the community to collect money that's owed to the community. You know, I think there's a perception that the tax man goes out there and, you know, collects money and then we keep it, and the more we get, the better it is. But you know, the money that comes through is in our bank account, I think, for less than 24 hours before it goes to the Reserve Bank, before it's farmed out to where it needs to go. So, you know, we are very conscious that the money that we collect is the community's money, and it needs, you know, the government needs it for stimulus. They need it for, as you know, you would all know, for the community to run effectively. So we do take that role really seriously, and it is something that we put a lot of effort into, because it is so important. So I think for, you know, the 2023 financial year, we've learned a lot from COVID. We've learned a lot from our approach. So hopefully what you'll see going forward is that continuation of the empathetic approach, and trying to understand different circumstances to be able to help in the best way possible. Obviously, where people are at the pointy end, or, you know, deliberately trying to fraud the system or do the wrong thing, you know, that work has actually never stopped. We didn't stop that through COVID. That continued on and will continue on. And we will continue to make sure that we are chasing those who are deliberately doing the wrong thing, but working with those who don't deliberately do the wrong thing, who may just make mistakes. So we will see, obviously, an increase. You know, you're probably seeing, hopefully you've already seen an increase in phone calls, debt collection, letters, following up on lodgements. As I said previously, we don't want people to be in a worse position, so we are going to try and re-engage. And people who aren't engaging, for us, we kind of look at that and go, well, we don't know if someone's struggling if they're not engaging, they're just ignoring us. So we're going to treat them as someone who doesn't want to talk to us. So I definitely suggest, if you have clients who are a little bit hesitant or are worried because they can't pay, you're much better off getting them to talk to us early, because you know, if we think that someone's deliberately ignoring us and doing the wrong thing, then we'll treat them that way. You know, we can only treat you the way that what we see, you know, the evidence and the facts that we have before us. So I think 2023, hopefully you'll see some learnings. Hopefully you'll see empathy, you know, that empathetic approach continuing, but there certainly will be that we are, conscious that this is community's money that we need to make sure that we are collecting on behalf of the community.
So I saw there was a little bit of there was a few stories in, I think, yesterday's papers about the ATO starting to get back at just what you were saying before, and I take it that probably came out of a press release from the ATO, I suspect, and that's that part of trying to, I suppose, re-engage with the community and saying, okay, well, look, we understand that there's been issues, and it's been going on for a little while, probably since the bushfires, really. But now we need to start dealing with some of those tax affairs. Would that be what it will be?
So there's a few things. So we do certainly, we try and make sure the community knows what we're doing. And yeah, so I've been saying for a little while in speeches and in our speaking engagements, and we've been going out a little bit and trying to get people to understand where we're at in our approach. So that first that first phase was that really just, we're going to have a chat with you. Now that COVID lockdown restrictions have eased pretty much across the states everywhere, we are far more focused now on going back to those states that we kind of left behind, well, not left behind, but didn't do much with because the pressures that they're facing, to get them back on track. So it just comes in time with the, we do have a strategy around, well, what's the immunisation rate, 2 weeks after, the set targets, etc. We kind of use that as well around, well, what does that mean for us, and how do we make sure that the community doesn't fall behind?
Yeah, interesting. Can we talk a little bit about the lodgement program? Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. So firstly, can you maybe just give for those that maybe don't deal directly with that side of things, just a little bit about how it works?
Yeah. So as you know, there are set dates in legislation for lodgement of forms and obligations. So the income tax return is due on the 31st of October every year, and that's for everyone. What we've then done on top of that is probably about 10 years ago, we looked at that when those dates were set, and created a lodgement program working group to try and understand the pressures that accountants were facing in terms of managing workload over 12 months. So it's not realistic to expect a tax agent to lodge all of their clients' returns, income tax returns, by the 31st of October. Like you just couldn't get it done. It'd be nuts. So we've applied these concessional due dates that are available to practitioners. So it's not a due date for an individual. It's the due date for the practitioners to be able to manage their workload over a 12-month period. So, and there are multiple obligations that you can lodge. Under that, we then have different support measures. So we have the deferrals that you can apply for when you can't meet those dates. We have a supported lodgement program, which is a specialised program that we've really ramped up during this time, specifically for practitioners who need that extra support to be able to apply for deferral, to be able to manage that program. So I guess in a nutshell, that's kind of what it is, and we're actually reviewing that now. So over the last probably 4 or 5 years, we've seen a slow but steady increase in deferral requests every year, even before COVID hit. So for us, that was a bit of an indicator of, well, is the lodgement program working? Do we need to do anything to change it? So we've just had our first meeting of the Lodgement Program Working Group last week, where we discussed, well, what's the intent of the working group, what's the intent of the lodgement program, before we go into a little bit more of a deep dive of, is there anything that we need to do? And that group is predominantly tax BAS agents and professional associations, as well as a couple of key people from the ATO.
Okay. And so let's say, a tax agent needs, because, there's a few pressures in our industry at the moment. There's staffing pressures, which probably most industries have probably got at the minute. There's just a little bit of burnout from, the constant pressures over the last 18 months or so. If an agent needs additional time in order to meet their lodgement obligations, what's the best way of going through that?
So there are a couple of ways. Let me start by saying that we have been really closely monitoring lodgement trends, because obviously that to us is a bit of an indicator. and we haven't seen anything that is concerning us. So we're actually, the lodgement trends over the last 5 years since I've been looking at them have remained fairly steady. So I just want to point that out early on, is that we're not seeing agents not lodging. So we are actually seeing that the lodgement patterns are how we'd expect them to be. Having said that, we absolutely do have support for agents who are struggling or whose clients are struggling or needing extra support, because it's not, we know that it's not just the tax agent who might be having difficulties. It's a business that won't come in to see, and so that kind of all affects the lodgement program. So we've got a couple of things. So we've got your normal deferrals online that you just apply for in your normal way that you do, that you've always done. Following feedback that received from the community from our stewardship group, which involves tax professionals and professional associations, and I include BAS agents in that as well. We did hear that agents were meeting with clients and they'd call up the ATO for a quick deferral of, a weekend or a week for the clients who are in their office. And we had a rule in place that you couldn't, agents weren't allowed to do that over the phone. You had to do it on, on a form. And we all know that takes like 28 days and we've got someone in your office. It just makes no sense, especially when the client could call and get their own deferral. So we kind of looked at that and went, yeah, that really doesn't make any sense. Let's think about a way to just alleviate that kind of pressure. So we do want tax agents and BAS agents to be able to apply for deferrals online. But we do recognise that there are going to be instances where it doesn't make sense and you should be able to do it over the phone. So we've introduced where you can apply for up to 5 clients at a time over the phone. And we thought anything over that, you'd probably spend just as much time filling in a deferral form than you would then, talking through the call centre with that. So that was just, something we introduced upfront following feedback. And we also have our supported lodgement program, which I just spoke about recently. So through Practice Mail, selecting the debt and lodgement topic and then putting in supported lodgement program, you can send through a request for support from a specialist team in my space who help you if you're really needing that extra support. So your whole of practice has suffered. We know that, there are things that are completely out of your control. We've seen, illness in a practice where it's a 2-person practice. We've seen death in a family that, has massive impacts on lodgement. We've seen mental health issues. So all of that, all of those kinds of things, we've got a specialist team who can work with you to look at your lodgement program, and they will say, okay, what can you do within the next 2 weeks or within the next 4 weeks, and we'll defer everything else. And then we'll come back and touch base after that time and go, okay, how have you gone? Now what can we do? How do we work together? They'll help you clean up your client list so that you've got, you remove any old clients that aren't on there. And they'll help you, kind of, I guess, navigate through the system when you're really struggling. So they're the key things that we have in place. We are also introducing, and I think it'll probably be around the end of next year. So I would like it much sooner, but COVID had a big impact on our IT program of work because, as you all know, we had to deliver, significant packages. So everything else has kind of been pushed back. So what we are looking at doing, though, is introducing an automatic deferral request process in online services. So you'll be able to select the clients that you want a deferral for, click a button, and as long as they meet the criteria, so there'll be agent assessed, there'll be agent assessed deferrals, so no longer than 4 weeks before the due date, don't have any other deferrals in place for them. They'll just go straight through and they'll show up in your system within, like, hopefully, an hour or so, depending on how long it kind of takes. So that is coming. That should hopefully be much easier for you, and you'll just be able to have that certainty for your clients straight away.
That sounds good. So that will come into place probably in about 12 months. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm hoping before 12 months. We are really trying to push it, because obviously it actually saves us a lot of processing time as well. So, you know, it's a win-win on both sides. But yeah, it is based on our IT program of work.
Sounds good. So with the say, I would call it more of a bespoke, I suppose, solution to, let's say there's a mental health issue within a practice, or some other issue that is just is very practice specific. What's the best way of contacting the ATO in relation to those sorts of issues?
Yeah, I definitely recommend you use the supported lodgement program for that. So that's through practice mail, debt and lodgement as the topic when you click it, and then supported lodgement program. You can even look, if it depends how you're going. If you really cannot even think about going through your client list, you can just write help and someone will give you a call. But, you know, the more information that you give us, the more that we can do before we call you, the more we can kind of help you later on. But yeah, so that team is specifically set up for tax and BAS agents as a specialist service for those who are, you know, really need that additional support. If you can fill in a lodgement deferral request, I'd suggest you do that. But if you really need that help, then we're absolutely there to be able to help you.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. So one of the questions that when we were pulling this this particular webinar together, one of the questions that continue to come up is an issue of keeping up to date is removing clients who agents no longer deal with. And is it possible to ask for and receive a full list of clients and when they're due?
So there's a report that you can generate for upcoming lodgements. So that's through online services and PLS, so through your software. So there is a report, like an outstanding lodgement report that you can generate. In terms of a client list of clients who you no longer have, our system tells us that they're your clients until you remove them. So we don't necessarily have a list of who's not your client. We can give you a list of who your clients are. And I would suggest going through that supported lodgement program through practice mail to be able to get that. But what you can also do is, if you know which one, so if you do an outstanding lodgement report and you actually look and go, none of these clients are mine anymore, we can do a bulk removal for you. So you can remove your clients yourselves. It takes about 15 minutes for that to go through the system. We do understand, though, that if you want to remove 100 clients, that's really time consuming for you. So we can do it. So if you go, once again, through practice mail, select the debt and lodgement topic, use a bulk client removal as the subject, and then use a general inquiry type, attach a list of those clients that you want removed, and we'll then do that for you. So I think you can download your own client list as well through online services. So you just need to, if you want, I don't have that in front of me, but it is on our website under remove client or client lists, has clients you no longer represent. They've got that information around how to actually get a list of those clients. We'll then remove them for you. So we're more than happy to do that. But we need to know which clients you want for, and we'll do that for you. And that helps, to clean up and make sure that you kind of have a better view of the health of your practice as well. But that supported lodgement program, that's one of the things that they do as well. So if agents need that extra support, one of the services is that bulk removal of clients that you no longer use or have.
Excellent. No, thank you for that. Now, I think we might open it up to questions at this stage. Chris, there's a few questions there. Do you want to ask them? Right. Okay. Let me see if I can. Okay. I'll ask questions then. The system won't let you get rid of old companies you have deregistered. they end up on my outstanding list. What can I do? And this is from Lynn.
Yeah, I think you need to contact us there. So you can't remove a deceased client from your client list. And I think deregistered companies as well, because they're deregistered. So you do need to contact us. So we go through the tax practitioner line, and they'll be able to help you with that. They can just help remove those clients. We do know that that's just the way that the system works.
Right. Question from David. Is there different collection rules for different levels of money outstanding? Does someone who owes 100,000 get treated differently to someone who owes 5,000?
Yeah, look, I think everyone gets the same, I guess, treatment. So the treatment, if you have an outstanding lodgement, is to get you on a payment plan or get you to pay it. So, if you have a debt of 5,000, 100,000, neither of them are going to be, you can apply for a payment plan through online services for both those amounts. And unless you have other issues around, so if you've defaulted quite a few times, if there's, other things that we're seeing, the treatment is the same. So, we still encourage you to pay in full. If you can't, set up a payment plan. If that's an issue, apply for a payment deferral. And if you then need any extra support, then contact us and we'll help you through it. But we do encourage using online services, set up a payment plan, and do that. We used to not allow payment plans to be set up if there were deferrals previously, but we've stopped that. So we actually recognise that a lot of the time, sometimes it's a banking timing issue, and we do really want people to get onto those payment plans. So we have changed that, and we've also changed. I'm not sure if you've seen it or not, but you can actually amend and cancel payment plans on online services now. So it used to be where you'd have to set one up and then set another one up, but you can actually cancel one and then put all your payment plans into one. So hopefully that's a bit easier for you as well.
No, thank you. Maybe that question might have come about because I think in the last webinar that we had, where we had Gary Busby and Bronwyn Dumont talking, one of the comments that came up was about the reporting to the credit agencies of debts of over 100,000.
Yeah. Okay. So that's sorry, that's a little bit different. So that's obviously if you're a business, a company who has a debt with the ATO over at that 100,000 and hasn't made contact with us in 90 days. So we will try our best to engage with you. And essentially, if you engage with us and talk to us about your position, that automatically stops that reporting to credit agencies. So it's not quite as there's a lot of processes, a lot of steps that we go through before we actually put someone on that list, and we try our best to engage as much as we can before then. So if you ignore us and don't try and put in a payment plan, don't request for a payment deferral, don't start talking to us about it, then there's not much we can do. That's kind of the law says we have to put you on. But I mean, there's 90 days. So the whole point of that is disengagement for a period of 90 days before you go on that list. So just engage, and you won't go on the list.
Yeah. And a similar question in this one from Claudia, and that was, hi Sylvia, what is the ATO position if a business has 110,000 GST debt and entered into a payment plan and then they are not able to continue making new payments?
Contact us. So every situation is different. There's no blanket approach that we have for dealing with people. So we learned that doesn't work. So every situation is different. We'll talk to you. We'll understand your payment plan. You can renegotiate payment plans. So, we certainly don't want people to be, worried about contacting us because they can't make payments. Call us. Let's renegotiate. Let's see what we can do.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Well, I don't think there's any other questions, and we're right on 1 o'clock. So, look, Sylvia, thank you very much for joining us today and sharing your knowledge in relation to this area. It's been fascinating. Thank you everybody for taking the time out of your day to join us in another webinar, and there'll be another one in about 3 weeks' time, and we welcome you to come back and attend then. And everyone have a good day, and thanks again, Sylvia. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.